And I want to thank you all for having me. And Steve, thanks a lot for reaching out and getting me on your schedule. My name's Mike Ritter. I'm the lead planner for the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm located here in the Tri-Cities, but I, of course, work statewide. I've been with the agency for 14 years, and I was hired initially to address the wind energy development in the state. So I've worked on every wind power project in the state and still am active with them. Then the wind energy kind of slowed down a lot. And there was a period of time where there wasn't a whole lot going on. I assumed some more duties down here in Benton and Franklin County related to local development, while still keeping abreast of the renewables. And then when solar started taking off, I appointed myself as the agency lead, and no one has been upset that I did that. So I come to you today having given so many outreach presentations across the state, both in person and virtually, to high schools, colleges, and groups like yours. And so I really want to thank you for your time. I would say that if you have any questions along the way, please interrupt me. I can't always see hands and stuff. And I think that's the best way for us to get those questions answered right off the bat. So I've got about 20 slides, and I think they'll give you a good overview of what we got going on in the state. And here we go. So we're going to talk tonight about solar development in Washington State. The two pictures are from Washington State. They're from a project that is under construction / operational. It's in Klickitat County. And what I want you to notice on the left photo is those are people that are all 5 feet tall to 6 feet tall. So you get an idea of how these things are set up and the spacing and things like that. These panels follow the sun every day, and they're all connected together by the wires underneath and things like that. And so the one on the left probably had to have a little groundwork done to it, so it's probably got some revegetated spots. The area on the right, does anyone recognize that plant? Shout it out if you do. That would be death camas. And so we have lots of native plants that are, of course, in these areas where these projects are proposed. So what does it look like in Washington State? Well, this is just a general slide here. You've got the 3 solar projects on the left, and those 2 do not occur in the state of Washington. Those are what are called the reflective or mirror solar accumulators. Our projects are like the ones on the top left, which are the ones that actually absorb the sun's energy and convert it to electricity. Again, I put a couple pictures on the right. That's just over the border in Oregon of about 2 years ago, a solar project right next to a wind project constructed over former wheat fields. So in our state, the biggest challenge has been this rapid build out. It's really, build out's kind of the incorrect word here. The rapid interest in industrial solar facilities in the state of Washington. And the agency I work for, Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, it's been a rapid but more of a reactive response, trying to engage folks in the Olympia and at the policy level. And from my interactions out in the field and regional level, to work with planners, permitting agencies, consultants, and projects, and landowners. This project is in Lind, Washington, just north of Connell, south of, what is the town there? South of something, anyway. And it was the first solar project in the state, and Ritzville, south of Ritzville. And it's operated by Avista Power, and it's approximately 200 acres. Again, you get an idea of just how these are laid out. You know now, because you saw those pictures before, that they're about 4 to 5 feet off the ground. They follow the sun all day, and they're fenced in by national electric codes. These are electrical generating facilities and therefore must be fenced in. The big challenge is, where do you put these in the landscape? Here we're looking at over in Klickitat County. In the background, we have Bighorn Wind, and in the foreground, we have the Lund Hill Solar Project. It's about a 1,200 acre project there. So where do we put them, or where do they propose to put them, I should say? We worry about connectivity, how we keep habitats and ecosystems and landscapes connected as you put in 800 to 1,500 acres of fenced projects. We are concerned about modified habitats. I would ask all of you that if you put a piece of shade cloth, or let's say a sheet of plywood over your backyard at 4 feet high, it would shade your backyard and you might expect to see some changes in the grass or your garden. And so these are some of the things we've asked the projects to think about, is these modified habitats that are underneath the panels and inside the fence. Science from around the world and research shows that there are ecological changes that happen because of the shading effects, primarily. And then, as you might guess, a lot of these projects are out in rural landscapes, and it's a big change. We shouldn't. And so this is just how it goes. I don't know if you all are familiar with how like vineyards are put in, but the picture on the left kind of reminds me of how they pop in vineyards. They got a machine that's just punching in poles, and then they'll have a group of workers come by afterwards and basically hang the panels on it. So there's not a lot of disturbance to the ground. The picture on the right shows that Lund Hill project in Klickitat, and at most projects, there's some grading and filling where there's a little, the topography is just not right, or where they have to get the drainage better and things like that. So the picture on the right shows where they've done a little grading and ground clearing, of course, which they're going to have to revegetate. But by and far, projects do not want to disturb the ground at all, because anytime you move dirt, it costs a lot of money. So they'd rather just kind of mosey over the ground and punch in the poles and hang the panels. Moving forward. So the reason I'm here tonight is just awareness and outreach is the big thing. And also we're going to get talking here about some of these landscape scale considerations, but it has been me and a couple other folks primarily engaged in this over 3 years, and lots of other interest from the agency. But over the last 3 years in Washington State, it has gone from 16 projects to 46. It's gone from 26,000 acres to, I can't see it because it's underneath you guys on my screen. And it's gone up to, over 80 square miles of projects when you put them all together side by side. And I don't want you to forget about wind. There's 10 new wind power projects also proposed in the state of Washington. And big surprise, they're not, solar and wind are not just in Eastern Washington, and you will see here shortly. And there we are. You can see, don't try to count the dots because I'm not sure if there's 46 solar dots. I'm pretty sure there's 10 blue dots for wind, but that's generally where they occur. You can see there's just 5 on the west side, 3 solar and 2 wind. And the rest are basically in what we would call the shrub steppe or the Columbia Basin Plateau. Any questions on this so far?
Michael, would you mind going back one slide? I didn't
Certainly.
get a good look at that. Thank you.
You got it. I'm going to move this little picture of all you. There we go. Now I can see the numbers. You got it? Good.
Yep, thank you.
Michael, what's the date on your 46 projects and 57,000
Today?
Thanks.
Yeah, I went back through GIS and checked all the numbers because the last presentation I gave was, I think, 2 months ago, and I think we've added 2 more projects and some more acreage and some more square miles. So it's current as of today. Moving forward.
Actually, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So whose land are these projects on typically?
Private.
Private land.
Yes. All of them. There is some DNR land in some of these. But primarily all private land.
Is it lucrative for the property owner?
I would be speculating if I kind of answered that, but I'm going to say yes.
Who pays them?
The project, the company.
The utility?
No, not, it's the developer. So the developers are like companies like Avangrid, Iberdrola, Cypress Creek. And so they do all the studies and the permitting and they build it.
Is that a power purchase agreement?
Yes, it is.
Ah,
How
Yeah,
much,
so-
how
so-
much of a subsidy do the companies get?
I don't know. So this response that you're seeing here is in response to our utilities in the state of Washington saying, we are forecasting that we're going to need some renewable power in our portfolio. And so these companies are responding by going out and acquiring leases and proposing projects, anticipating that they can meet a RFP for power in 2025 for, I don't know, BPA or Pacific Energy or somebody. Anyway, there's a lot of there's a lot going on there. Moving forward, we good? Yeah. Okay, hearing no complaints, we shall move forward. So here we are, most of them right here in the east side of the state. Yeah, and we'll keep going because we got some more data on these. Go ahead. Anyone? If any of these are in your neighborhood, please feel free to reach out with me and I can provide you more information. It's kind of not a slippery slope, but just I guess a professional confidentiality. How do I know about all these, right? The projects reach out to our agency because they need priority habitat and species data because they're doing their environmental constraints review. To get that data from us, they must provide us with a polygon or a shapefile, the GIS. When that happens, the GIS shop notifies me immediately. I drop it into GIS and I've got it. I'm showing you just the dots, but every one of these dots has a polygon associated with it. So, and I'm going to talk about this in a few slides. What you're seeing here, 85% of these projects are not public. And by public, I mean they've gone to permitting. So there's a document out there that says it's a SEPA document or something from FSEC that requires a public comment. So these are projects that are just kind of there waiting for whatever. I'm gonna keep-
Michael, on the on FSEC's handling of the BlackRock proposals and expedited processing of those, have you been brought in to consult on connectivity and habitat effects and so forth?
Everything since day one, yeah.
Mhm.
Everything. I'm the agency's FSEC technical advisor to FSEC. So yes, and I've coordinated with all the biologists. In fact, me and some other biologists have been working in the BlackRock Valley for over 10 years to address connectivity and fire issues. And then, solar showed up. So yeah, we're pretty well versed in stuff out there. Angie?
So you might get to it later, and so just tell me, but I was wondering, the way you spoke to it was like, this is kind of secretive. But I would imagine, well, I mean like private.
Yeah.
And I would imagine it's all available through public records requests as for the permitting, you could confirm that. And then do they have to do a SEPA review, environmental impact study? And lastly, what was I gonna ask you? Oh, do they, are most of these wind projects to provide power locally, or is it going out of state? And maybe
As
you'll
far-
get to it later.
As far as I know, none of these projects, well, all the ones in Eastern Washington do not provide power to Eastern Washington. I don't know about the west side ones. So,
Just a clarification, they probably do provide power to Washington State.
yeah.
Oh, so I mean, if it's the utilities who are after the power, it would be like Seattle City Light or somebody driving this.
Right, so there's a project or two that probably feed a Vista Utilities up on our side, nice Spokane. There's a couple around, they're smaller ones, less than maybe 150 acres that are, I think would tie into like companies like the Big Bend Cooperative, which is up here in Franklin County. So there might be some local power, but for the most part, my understanding is the power does not stick around here. And I
But
just, go ahead.
I was just going to clarify that it's Washington State trying to meet its goals for the Clean Energy Act. Seems like that's probably a big driver for a lot of these things.
Yes, it is. I'd like to kind of answer, can I answer Angie a little bit first, and then
Sure.
Yvette, do you have a question too, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Angie, so you had a SEPA, yeah, I talked to Secretive, I guess it's confidentiality. We asked them to be confidential with our sensitive species data. And so I guess as a business practice, we've been confidential on the polygons. Yes, we've had agencies and groups request all solar shapefile data from WDFW through a public records request. This map has, or renditions of it have been shown at our Wildlife Commission meeting. It's been published in the Seattle Times? I think that was last summer. So it's out there, and I'm just, we don't want to share more than what we're supposed to, but this has been, I think it's about awareness and understanding, and there's no other way to share it than to show it. So yeah, I hope that answered it, and maybe we'll come back to that in a little bit, but I see we got some more hands up. I got Yvette and then David. Yvette, did you have a question? Or Joseph, Yvette? Okay. Maybe not. David, how about you?
Yeah, I was hearing the controversy during the debate between Smiley and our current senator Murray. At any rate, there was a discussion about the Snake River dams. How many installations would it take to offset what power generation we lose by taking out the Snake River dams?
How many would require? Well, I don't know. Let's see. We have the project proposed just south of me, the Horse Heaven Wind and Solar Energy Project. And that project is about equal to the output of the Snake River dams.
I see.
And it's also just a few megawatts less than what the nuclear reactor produces out at Hanford. So
Is
it's a
it
big
already
project.
operating?
Excuse me?
Is it already operating, the Horse Heaven?
Oh, no, not at all. It's still in review through FSEC at this point.
It's not replacing a vineyard, is it?
No, it's about in 88% dry land wheat. I'm going to move forward here because I've got a few more slides, and then we can keep asking. So
Mike, I'm sorry, I know you want to move on, but Yvette just commented that she's got her mute button off, so she's got a question.
go for it. Thank you.
Yeah, I was looking at the map and I wondered, or it looks like Yakima County, are any of these a part of the Yakima tribe?
There's no projects proposed on tribal lands, on reservation land. I
Okay.
should say.
And I don't know a lot about how electrical power transmits to, how it transfers, if it goes to telephone poles or, sort of because I grew up there in Grand Coulee and Grand Coulee Dam.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of used to those big power poles, but I'm also very similar because I grew up in a Nispelem Valley Rural Electric, and they're very much, they're sort of not on the Grand Coulee Dam grid as far as I know. So we have inflated rates for electricity on the Colville Tribal Reservation area. And so I'm just curious about what kind of brokered agreements are there with the rural electric cooperatives
I have no
for
clue on
solar?
that.
in Washington?
No clue.
Okay.
Really good question, though.
So, and Bonneville Power doesn't have anything to do with any of these solar units.
Yes, they do. Yes, because some of these projects will be on Bonneville lines. Yes.
Yeah, it would be nice to have the map show the, the colored buttons as to who has control over those different sites. So
Control
I
as in
appreciate this
related to the utility?
Yeah, who owns the power?
It's a good point.
Yeah.
I think that different data layers on here it just tells a different story. Of course, I'm coming it from a wildlife and habitat and conservation perspective, but that's a really good point. And something I'm going to say towards one of the latter slides might help you to help figure that out. But I'm going to keep going here because we'll have some more. So this just gives us a summary of where projects are at right now. 3 operational, 2 under construction. Was there a question or was there just an echo? Okay. 7 permitting. Most of them are proposed or potential. So they've reached out to us. We may have met with them about maybe some proposed studies or maybe not, but they have reached out to us for our data and they have provided us a shapefile. Almost all the projects are in the Eastern Washington, Columbia Plateau region, and the vast majority have not initiated any type of formal permitting or going public, if you will. But they're probably doing some type of work. They might be looking at maybe some transmission issues or looking for tax credits or waiting for the supply chain to change or something like that. And then the wind projects, there are 8 on this side and 2 on the other side of the state. So, well, the projects are driven by the ability to acquire, lease a distance to a substation and economics. And then they talk about mitigation and impacts to habitat and species. But in my line of work, we talk about avoid first and then minimize and then mitigate. So what I'm saying in this first bullet is that projects come to us with a footprint already, I guess, a project area already decided. It would be like you owning 10 acres and saying, I want to put the house over there, and regardless of what any environmental or engineering constraints you might find at the county planning office. So impacts to native habitats range from 0 to 90%. Some are all really dryland wheat, and some are a lot of shrub steppe. We are concerned, and we try to address through our meetings with the projects to address ecological functions and values and trying to avoid significant impacts to those and to, I guess, preserve and enhance the increasingly rare ecosystem of shrub steppe habitat. From our perspective, impacts to sensitive species cannot be mitigated. Sensitive species in our book are those that are candidate, threatened or endangered. So an example could be a ferruginous hawk, golden eagle, sage grouse, things like that. I'm sure there's some other birds and some other plants too. A big issue with solar projects around the US, we're part of a nationwide group that gets together and we talk about issues related to solar. And we're not the only state feeling this massive pressure for build out. And one of the big issues nationwide is fencing. It just isolates the landscape. We lose connectivity in corridors and just the impacts to, a whole host of species. And then, so solar is a big change, but I think we also need to, we've asked the permitting agencies, the consultants and the projects to consider the cumulative impacts of solar on the landscape. Those of you know that there's lots of places where there's a lot of rural development on zoned 10 and 20 acre lots. There's a lot in my neck of the woods down here. There's a lot of agricultural development with vineyards and things like that. So there's a lot of big changes on the landscape that are contributing to impacts to functions and values, connectivity and corridors and species and plants. Couple of slides here. The left one obviously is wind, the other two are solar. Just an example of some of this landscape features. On the wind power projects, yes, there's impacts, but the landscape stays open and connected pretty much. You can farm right up to them. You can still bird watch out there. You could still hunt if you wanted to, if it's open for hunting. So there's still a lot of openness to that landscape, but for the solar projects, you got a fence around them. And so most of them propose chain link fences, 6 to 8 feet tall, razor wire, barbed wire on top. We've got them away from the barbed wire, but we've asked them to raise it a foot off the ground, maybe use fences that have 4 or 6 inch openings in them so that some animals, skunks, raccoons, coyotes, can just kind of go through the fence instead of trying to dig underneath. And it's an issue nationwide, the fencing, and trying to get a better understanding of animal response to an industrial facility, animal response to fencing. Do some animals just leave the area? Do they kind of get used to it? Does it displace them? Is it temporary? Is it permanent? There's just a lot of unknowns. So
How many large raptors are being killed by the windmills, do you think, the wind turbines?
Very few in this state, very few. The projects do about 1 to 3 years of studies before they actually construct. Some projects have done more, some maybe just 1 or so, depending on what the recommendation is. They do a really good job of dialing in where these need to be to get the wind and not impact birds and bats. But what we found out is that if you and I went out and did surveys for the next 2 years and we're looking for, let's say, golden eagles, right? And we might get 0 because their populations are low. And so they just don't show up here. And that's how populations go. And then in years 3, 4, and 5, the project is constructing and all of a sudden they hit one. And, region-wide golden eagle populations are rising. So just because they did the surveys doesn't mean the population is low or non-existent, because we have to understand that, wildlife populations fluctuate. And so when we do these projects, when we make comments on these, we frequently recommend that there's a technical advisory group formed to monitor the projects for anywhere from 2 to 5 years. And if something does happen where there's a large fatality event, birds or bats, or a significant fatality event, say like a ferruginous hawk or a golden eagle, those technical advisory groups or committees convene. They're made up of, like myself, somebody from the Audubon, somebody from the county, a landowner. And we talk through it, how should we address this? And that's how we've worked with projects. But in this state, it's been fairly good, actually west-wide. But there are incidents where the weather gets bad, it's foggy, it's cloudy, it's windy, it's during migratory season, and you get some fatalities. But for the most part, been pretty good.
Mike, Ormond has his hand raised there.
Fire away.
Michael, when you were talking about corridors, I'm assuming you were talking about large-scale migration corridors, correct?
Yes and no. There's corridors in the state that have been modeled through a collaborative process that shows linkages across the landscape that have the right amount of variables that are preferred by wildlife. Do some of those overlap known migratory routes? Yes. Are others just good year-round connections on a landscape, like let's say through a coulee or a draw, like between Connell and Washtuckna? If anybody's ever been there, that's kind of a cool spot. But anyway, so yeah.
But let's take the solar project that you have here in the bottom left-hand corner. And I think that's Wheat Ridge, right south of Boardman. Could you divide this up so you don't fence such big blocks, and maybe do some smaller transitional corridors through the project itself?
Yes, very, very good point, and thank you for mentioning that. This is not in Oregon, this is in Washington, this is Lind,
Well, this is
Washington.
Lind, is it? Yeah.
But yeah, so this is a 200-acre project, so yes, on larger, well, not on larger, on any projects, the land is not flat. It's got these little swales and dips in it. And they typically don't construct in those swales or dips. And so the project is, instead of one big project, it's a group of arrays, solar arrays. And we say fence in the arrays and leave the draws, canyons, swales open.
Right.
The question becomes then, if it's an elk migratory area or an elk corridor, how wide should those be?
Yeah.
So in some projects, we've recommended 1 to 2 miles wide. So that big game, they don't even see the project really, and they can get through those without, I guess, being disturbed or being nervous. But yeah, we'll touch that. Let's get some of these impacts going here. We've identified 3 categories of impacts. You see permanent, temporary, and the other one's called altered. And that's the area underneath the panels that's going to be partially shaded. That's going to force rain onto a drip edge and drip over there all the time instead of everywhere. And a lot of these impacts are similar to wind and solar, except for this altered category. Here's another one for specifically to solar. We're taking our shrublands, our sagebrush, and we're converting it to a grassland. They don't want shrubs underneath the panels or between the rows, because as the shrubs grow, they're going to get in the way of the shade and they might get in the way of the panel operation. So we don't lose native habitat per se, we just gets converted to something else that has a lower function and value. Shading. This is known by science that you change the temperature, you change the moisture, then you change the plants and you change all kinds of things when you shade areas. Now, granted, these rows are 30 feet apart and the panels are 6 to 12 feet long. And so there's a lot of air movement and sun movement, but it's something that we have been pretty passionate about, and the companies have incorporated into an altered category. And there's the fencing one. Yeah, you just can't get away from that. We every time we try, we say no fencing, but we get the same response. Some company, there's one company we work with, they always use 4x4 or 6x6 openings in the fence. Others always use chain link and raise it off the ground. But those of you from this side over here know that on windy days, chain link fence doesn't do real well with lots of tumbleweeds, because they stack up on it and they can really do some damage to a fence. Another big thing that comes up is dust and snow removal. So some of the projects have asked for temporary wells, and maybe they're going to truck in some water for dust control on the panels. Most projects end up not doing that because the panels are so efficient that even if they get a little layer of dust, they're okay. And some of the recommendations we have made just to enhance the vegetation and wildlife value is, we know you got to have to mow or control the vegetation because you don't want to have all that fire material there, because things do dry out. Let's just not mow until the grasses and the plants have all done their thing, and any wildlife in there has had a chance to nest and raise its young. And most places are okay with that. So what do? Our job is to provide recommendations to the permitting authority. And that's either a county, a project can go either route. They can choose if they want to go through county permitting or go through FSEC. We have a question, Miss Morris.
Oh, yeah, I was just wondering if fencing was required, like in Europe. Do they fence all of is that a standard practice in the industry?
It is here in the US, and it's kind of interesting. In the US, we have these industrial solar farms. They're big, they're 800 acres and larger. And in Europe, they use the term solar parks, and they're like less than 200 acres, and they're like in communities and in farms. And I've seen some in Australia and in England and in Germany. They do not have fences. they're open. They might have like a large hedge around them, so they're not visible, but I don't see fences very often over there.
So it's not exactly a safety concern.
It's a national
Yeah.
electrical code concern.
Yes, it's a National Electrical Code. It's an electrified facility and it says a fence.
Why don't wind farms need fences or turbines?
Good question. Because they're not creating electricity in the way a solar does.
Well, I mean, it could be that that practice could change, or, I mean, this is like a fairly new industry,
Yes, it is.
so.
All right. I don't know who was first, but somebody with a hand up can go. Alphabetic, go ahead.
So Michael, would your assessment be regarding these fences that we're just kind of making it difficult for ourselves by requiring fences and not letting the developer of the project figure out ways to make it work to adequate levels of protection?
Yeah, I mean, I
to
guess
put it in a little bit of a context, I think the oil and gas industry has always tried to make it really difficult for anybody to do anything that would compete with them. And it's plausible that it'd be very easy for them to just lobby a little bit to create rules that really make it difficult for sustainable energies to work.
Mhm. I think there's other technologies that would work the same as fencing. There's remote fences, there's cameras. I mean, if you're worried about security and safety, that could be an issue. A lot of the solar projects are in open range areas where cattle graze, and cattle beat these up pretty bad if they get next to them. So I think they'd have to raise them up a little higher to keep the cattle away from them. Again, it's a good question, and it's one that needs some more attention. Definitely.
Thank you, Michael.
So one other. Oops.
Who's Angie? Were you gonna? Michaela? Anyone?
Oh, I have a quick question. So these projects, like what percentage of them are on undisturbed native habitat versus farm land that's already in agricultural use?
Well, that's a good question, and we haven't done that analysis yet. I know one of the consultants is doing that. You know, I mean, there's a lot of projects out there, and most of them I've been to. I'm going to say 60 to 70% of them are going to impact shrub step in some way, shape, or form, but not like 100% impact from their project. The companies know, and that if they choose already disturbed ground, like say active farmland, like wheat fields, they're less likely to have an environmental impact. But I would like to say to the group that up in Douglas County, that patchwork of wheat, shrub steppe, and CRP lands is used a lot by sage grouse. They like fallow wheat fields, and our sage grouse in this state do not act like sage grouse in Western US that are really tied closely to shrub steppe habitat. So just saying, oh, well, let's just go put it in dryland wheat and we're fine, is really missing the point here. The other project is the one down here south of Kennewick, where it's on about 88% dryland wheat. Yet the project is in the last connectivity corridor that runs east to west along the Horseheaven Hills. So just because it's in a disturbed habitat doesn't mean there's no impact. Let's get through these.
So then, okay, so it's a matter of, is it a mitigatable impact or is it a permanent impact, as you say?
Yes, that is correct. Who else? We got a couple more.
Angie. So I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on the permitting process. If I heard you correctly, you said WDFW asks applicants to either comply with WDFW or SEC, no?
No. The project can choose whoever they want to get permitted through. It's the last bullet on this slide. The project can go through a county permitting, or they can go through FSEC. It's the project's choice, not ours.
Okay.
Our
So-
job is to provide recommendations to the permitting authority. We don't write the permit. We don't say, do this, do that. We say, we recommend corridors of 1 to 2 miles wide. We recommend the fence be raised. We recommend the project be put into groups of arrays instead of one big fence. But we make recommendations to the county planning department or the FSEC people that are working on the project, and they make the decision.
Okay, so then where are the rules set in place and by who? So if you let the applicant tell you what sensitive species there are on their property, who verifies that that's accurate? And
We
then
do. We
why
do.
is there just a recommendation? For example, if you had certain species and you knew that they needed a 12-inch opening to pass under during certain times of the year, how do you tell the applicant you must enable these species to pass through? So make it happen regardless whether it's chain link or hog wire or 12 inches above grade. How do you actually make sure that these openings are what they need to be?
Right, very good questions. So the first one was, they do their surveys. We recommend 1 to 2 years of surveys. We have a protocol. We give them, we say, follow this. If you got any questions along the way, we're happy to meet with you. They give us kind of an update, and they'll meet with us when their surveys are done, and they'll say, here's what we found. All along that time, I and other biologists through me are in contact with the consultants in the projects. And we provide them all the data we have. We said, hey, if you're going out there, you know, back in the 80s, we had some bald or golden eagles nesting on those cliffs. Or, 10 years ago, we used to have ferruginous hawks. Or on eBird, the Audubon website, they've been picking up sage sparrows in that sage patch. So we share information so that they're aware. They do the standardized surveys so that they can run the statistics on it and make it very objective. They come back, and now this is private property. We don't have permission as a state agency just to go on somebody's property. So a lot of times these consultants and projects get the first look at the resources on these properties. So it fills in some data gaps for us, but we frequently request site visits. And if something is like out in my landscape, we get a lot of burrows that could be used by burrowing owls or ground squirrels. And we'll say, hey, we need another year of surveys in, because you said they look kind of active this year, but you didn't find anything. Let's check it again next year. So, and they want to do that because they want to satisfy the environmental requirement that they did the surveys correctly and they either did or did not find. So it's vetted through us. We're really confident in what they've found and what we've found, and that we've talked together. We get a very good site description.
So lastly, in closing, sorry, I didn't get to complete the question. So almost all projects are on private property. That doesn't mean that people don't have to comply with permitting rules. And in a project like this, do you have a public process? Is there a public hearing where people can actually vet? Oh, good to know.
Yes. Yeah, just because it's private, I mean, it's not exempt from any county or FSEC type work. You still gotta, these projects are international firms that want to be considered green and they want to do things right. So yes, there's tons of public processes and opportunities to comment. Let's get to the
If I may.
fire away.
Yeah. So first I have a PSA. If you're not an experienced Zoomer, the host and co-host look at the participants list, and the person at the top of the list with the raised hand was the first person to raise their hand. Zoom does sort that. So if you're ever wondering who's next.
Thank you.
Okay. And then it's been a few years and I haven't used it since, but I did complete a course in solar system design and installation. And I have two theories on why the fencing has to be there. And one of them is they are pilferable. It's a lot easier to dismantle some solar modules and put them on a truck. So that would be concern number one. And then concern number two is, you get enough of those together parallel or in line, you can get easily electrocuted while you're pilfering these items. So I have a solar system on a ground mount on my property, and it is fenced and it has high voltage signs around it because I did not need kids coming through the neighborhood and touching stuff because it looks cool. So it's a distinct risk if you don't fence it, that people or animals could get electrocuted. So that's what I had to say about that.
Hi, I thank you for the presentation. I know I'm, been curious about this, but I had to travel down to Utah. My son's car was broken down there in Caliente near St. George, and I had to have the car towed there. He was driving a hybrid vehicle. It was this Prius C car, and of course, nobody knew how to fix it, and it was a problem. So we went down there, and driving through that area through Utah, around Milford and Cedar City, I was just amazed by almost the complete takeover of all of the valleys with solar power units, just like the ones that you've showed us here on the slide presentation today. But there was thousands and thousands of solar units there. So anyway, I wondered how they ranked in terms of their impact to the environment. And I'm just looking at the Solar Energy Industries Association that shows, comparatively what Washington has as compared to Utah. I mean, it has the map of the whole country. And it says that Washington State is 36. And we were 34th in 2021. The homes powered by solar is 32,305. And the investment in the state is 983 million. That the jobs are, that they're, it doesn't show the jobs, but it talks about the number of people involved with manufacturers, installers, developers, and others. But anyway, I'll try to study this, but I don't know if there's a place that shows environmental impacts by state due to solar.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that either. I think if you look in the scientific literature and you type in solar and wildlife, you'll see that there's issues. Anyway, one more question.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Leo, you're up.
There we are. Thank you. Thank you so much for this presentation. I have a question about the panels themselves of the solar, and considering are there grades of quality that applicants are using or choosing from as far as like their useful life and their disposal technology potential.
Yeah, I know very little on that. There are different technologies. Most of them try to get the latest and greatest. The panels I showed you for projects in the state of Washington collect energy on both sides. So that's pretty cool technology there, being able to collect on the dark side. And a question that always comes up is, what do you do when you get a panel that breaks or it kind of peters out and you got to replace it? Where do you get rid of those things at? And I'm not the one to ask on that, but it is a question that comes up on how do you get rid of these things? I got a couple more slides I'd like to get through because I think that would be helpful. Unless you, can we?
No, please do continue.
So this is just the two permitting processes. And all of these are public. The county's posted on their webpage. If you typed in FSEC, those letters right there, FSEC Washington, you'll see about the solar projects in the state that they're working on right now. You can sign up for their newsletters or announcements, so you know when they're asking for public comment. So we're right near the end here, folks. We're right now working with the governor's office, the Department of Commerce. We've worked with them for probably over a year. They have a low carbon energy siting study, making some recommendations to the legislature. The Department of Natural Resources has been working with us and others on their solar energy screening tool. And also Washington Fish and Wildlife has also been working with Washington Audubon, the Nature Conservancy, Conservation Northwest, a bunch of other NGOs on all of these solar issues and all the stuff we've talked about today. I've had discussions with all these groups on it, like, yeah, what are you hearing on fencing? How about the solar technology and things like that? But the big thing I want to make you aware of is this last bullet. This is called the least conflict solar siting process. They did it in California about 5 to 8 years ago. It was a rapid process where we had just started it in September for this state. We have 5 stakeholder groups. We have environmental conservation, agricultural lands, I think they're called farmlands, ranch lands, local communities, and industry. And we've already broken out into those 5 groups. You can be part of one of them, or 4 of them, or 3 of them. We're meeting every 2 weeks, and and the Conservation Biology Institute runs what's called Data Basin. It's a huge place where you can dump all of your maps and GIS stuff, and they run the models and program, and we develop a collaborative process of a map of the state of Washington where siting solar has the least conflict. You can just type in least conflict Washington State and you'll probably find it, but the groups are open now. We've kind of got the regulars in the group, but I'm sure if anybody's interested, be a great thing to jump on to see how all of these stakeholder groups and all of these people, all these agencies that I have on the screen right here, have individuals in this process. Last slide.
I put that link in the chat. That least conflict solar link is in the chat.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So, solar just doesn't have to go out on the rural landscapes. The picture on the left is Europe, where they have agrovoltaics, small solar parks or solar areas where the panels are elevated and you can crop underneath them. The middle 2 pictures are in India, where they've put solar panels over irrigation canals. Anybody from Eastern Washington knows we got canals everywhere. And in India and other places, they found that when you shade the canals, you don't lose so much water through evaporation, and the cool water helps cool the panels. The lower right is what is happening in California. That was about 2 years ago. They said we're going to do a feasibility study to see if we can put panels over some of the California waterways, and it's happening now. And the upper right is our IKEA store in Renton, which is one of the first rooftop solars in the state. It's about 4 acres and provides power to about 130 homes. We're also my agency is looking at putting solar on our hatcheries and maybe over our raceways. And then we have the great Seattle there, and just a little something you can read there as I close out the presentation.
Awesome.
Michael, thank you for that last note. Steve and I, some years ago, started a little joint project to encourage the development of a distributed energy.
Yes.
And we have not followed up on it, frankly, but one of the issues has to do with revising some of the rules around net metering and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not only Seattle that has the opportunity, we have numerous opportunities in Eastern Washington for precisely the same thing. So
yes.
Thank you for that.
Thank you for that comment. You're right. So it's just not about big industrial solar out in the rural landscape. We have to have an integrated approach to solar development in the state, and that's kind of what we've been pushing and talking to people about. And there's people working on the distributed and rooftop and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, thank you. I think that's it. The end.
Mike, you just at the tail end there mentioned what they call agrivoltaics. Is that something that you're aware of happening very much in the US?
Nope.
No.
Nope. Yeah, so as you can imagine, some in the science, there's science out there. It's expensive. I believe one project that I heard of in over in my area is considering an arrangement with one of the local farmers or ranchers there to do something along those lines, perhaps with some crop, just to show that it works. But again, large scale is really expensive to raise the panels up that high, I guess. So.
Okay, and also back to the project south of you, the one that you mentioned is going to disrupt the east-west corridor. Do you happen to know the footprint of that?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it's the Horse Heaven Hills project. It's on the FSEC website.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with the area down here, the landscape?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
So it goes from Findlay on the east, which is on the Columbia River, all the way along the Horse Heaven Hills to the stopping above Benton City. It's 17 miles long.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a combined solar, wind, and battery storage, and it is the largest project in the state for both individually for solar, individually for wind, and individually for battery storage. It's huge.
And I just noticed that you've got a bunch of hands again, but that's also the first time you mentioned battery storage. These other projects, would you even be aware of batteries were planned? Is that
Yes.
the thing? Yeah.
Almost all of them have it now. It's a real selling point, if you will, to be able to store power for 4 to 6 hours and release it to the grid when it's needed. Unlike wind is, you can't, well, they don't have battery storage for wind, but being able to store it and deliver the power is selling the projects. It's really working for them.
Okay. Arvia, you're at the top of the list there.
Arvia, then Mary. Arvia first.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the financial drivers for some of these really large projects in Eastern Washington, because I know that Seattle City Light, even with the amount of growth that Seattle's had in the past 10 years, its demand for electricity has actually gone down because of the efficiency. And so there's sort of like a disincentive in a way for us to have solar generation in Seattle, because Seattle City Light is actually struggling financially because demand for its product has gone down, even though it has a very clean portfolio of 95% or even more, 98% renewable energy. So I don't know. I think I think looking at some of the economic drivers is going to be important to try to get the right balance here so that we're optimizing our habitats as well as our potential for siting sites in places that are going to help conserve our habitats. And I don't know enough about the financial models, but I do know that about Seattle City Light. It's amazing to me that we built as much as we have in Seattle, and Seattle City Light actually has a decreased demand for electricity.
Unheard of.
That's well, you can look it up in their, it's easy to find in their reports. So anyway.
Thank you. Let's see, Mary, you're up.
Hi, this is John. He's the one with the question.
Okay, hey, John.
I'm not Mary. Hi. Hi. First, a question. What kind of solar panels are these? Are they all silicon solar panels, or are they other alternative solar panels?
I would have to look at the specs in the project, but I believe most of them are silicone.
Okay. So I'd like to make a number of comments about silicon solar panels. We're up in the Newport area, and we've been dealing with the possibility of the Pac West high test silicon smelter being located in our community. And initially, Pac West claimed that they would be a green facility since some of their product would their product is metallurgical grade silicon, would be used for silicon solar panels, and they claimed 50% of their product would be used for solar panels. Later, they changed it to 5%, which is more consistent with the current literature. So the silicon smelter would require 150,000 tons of blue gem coal and charcoal per year, and 130,000 tons of wood chips per year for the carbothermic reduction process of the silicon smelter to reduce and extract the silicon from silicon dioxide or quartzite. This would result in over 766,000 tons of greenhouse gases per year, plus hundreds of tons of other coal toxins per year. So I decided during this process to investigate the smelter's green claim, and I undertook a study to find out how silicon solar panel carbon footprints are determined. I reviewed hundreds and hundreds of papers. Here's what I found. Number one, carbon footprint calculations of silicon solar panels reported in the literature do not include the silicon smelting process. This is crazy, since silicon is the critical component of silicon solar panels. Number two, carbon footprint calculations use a process known as the life cycle assessment and life cycle inventory. These methods have been shown to be highly flawed. They're highly subjective, yield inconsistent and non-comparable results, are not governed by a standard unifying method, and are performed by industry without oversight by any independent governing body. Number three, according to the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, greenhouse gas emissions from biomass sources, wood chips, and charcoal, etc., these are used in the silicon smelting process, are not accounted for at the point of combustion in the energy and industrial sectors. This is crazy. A number of papers have challenged and refute this practice by the IPCC. And number four, the carbon dioxide sink loss due to the harvest of trees for wood chips and charcoal used in the smelting process is not accounted for in silicon smelter carbon footprint calculations. From the literature, it can take decades to more than 100 years to replace the carbon dioxide sink loss from the harvest of trees.
Wow.
So.
Not as green as you thought.
No, not as green as you would think. So using the smelter estimated raw material quantities and emissions quantities per year, I estimated the impact of silicon smelting on standard commercial 72 cell silicon solar panels. And I found that they account for more atmospheric carbon dioxide than they save over their 30-year lifetime. I just want to conclude. I want to say I am a pro alternative energy person and I'm a pro environment person, but this has been an astounding wake-up call. And there is a lot of information that's not getting out to people. If you are interested, I have a preprint paper that's posted on ResearchGate, and it's called The Impact of Silicon Smelting on Crystal Silicon Solar Panels. And you can find that on ResearchGate. I also have a guest opinion that was published in the Spokesman Review on April 5th of this year, describing what I've just discussed with you. So all in all, there are alternatives to silicon smelting that are being invested, and there are some successes, and there are a slew of alternatives to silicon. They all have their detractors, but what I think needs to happen is we need to get the whole carbon footprint calculation system and the whole evaluation of it under control, because right now it's just a Wild West situation and there are so many discrepancies. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you for that information. That was really useful.
Please
Yeah.
put the link and your contact information in the chat.
Okay. Let's see, we will do that.
Yep.
Okay.
Just type your email.
Type
Josh
it
is up.
in here. Okay.
That was really interesting.
Thank you.
While you're
I
typing,
can't see her.
let's
I can't.
move on to Sasha. Go ahead, Sasha.
Wow, I learned so much here.
How do you top that?
To the earlier point, I'm trying to remember who it was. With the decreased demand for electricity, there's always the possibility that we might sell it to other states. But the reason I put my hand up was about the canals. It seems that I read somewhere, maybe Holland, they were putting solar panels over the canals and found that it also decreased the evaporation of the water and kept it cooler because it was shading it from the sun.
Yes.
So that was my comment.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those areas where there's really no environmental issues. From our perspective, there's no fish issues, there's no habitat issues. It's an industrial linear feature that seems like well suited for a dual use to us, but we'll see. It's just, again, an integrated approach. Let's look at all opportunities if we're going to think about solar. Annie.
Okay, and Annie, your hand is up.
I also wanted the presenter's contact information because I have a question for him that I don't think other people would be interested in.
Okay, you want Mike's contact
Yeah,
information?
Mike, please.
Okay, so Mike, maybe you could pop that into the chat there.
I'll do that. I'll turn this one off. I'll stop sharing. Stop sharing.
Okay, well, that was really interesting presentation and a really interesting discussion. Martin and Becky, your hands are up.
Yes, I had one more question if you have time for it. That is a lot of what you're talking about with habitat and wildlife seems very focused on, on animals. And I'm with the Native Plant Society. Of course, there's a great deal of concern about the small plants growing beyond the sage, which you mentioned quite a bit. Is there any protections for rare plants, habitats that are in these areas? If you find that there actually are rare plants in the areas that are being proposed for use?
Yeah, a really good question. We rely on the heritage. I'm drawing a blank.
It's the natural heritage.
There you go.
program.
Thank you. So we rely on their data for sensitive plant populations. And I would like to say that although I've talked a lot about animals, our assessment of project is based on habitat. So it impacts to plants. And if it does happen to have some unique animals with it, well, that kind of bumps up its ecological value. I'm a little disheartened personally by the lack of protection for plants or unique plants within a solar facility. If you read up on the Lund Hill solar project in Klickitat County, you'll read about a plant that was first discovered at that site, first discovery in Washington State. And then there was another one that only ever occurred, I think, in Oregon. And it was found at the Lund Hill site. And I don't know if they put buffers around it or even if they're inside the fence or if they're outside, but I just thought there would be more, I don't know, protections or more discussion about those plants. But it's a good point that there needs to be more, I just think more discussion, collaboration about the plant populations.
Well, plants are often left out and, things could go different ways. Sometimes, there's possibility on some things that some plants would actually be more protected in an area that is fenced. You don't have, off-road vehicles running through and potentially going through one of your 3 populations of some rare plant that exists in the state. So things get complicated, but one issue that is the case with the Natural Heritage Program is that private lands, just like you can't just go out and think that this is all private land. The Natural Heritage Program, I've worked with them on a site in Eastern Washington that was a Palouse Prairie site, and alerted them to potential Palouse Prairie in a development area there that was permitted, had been permitted by the county. And then the permit was actually withdrawn because there was Palouse Prairie there, but it was only because, we lucked out on having some people who knew what was there on the site, because the site has private land, and so the Natural Heritage Program folks, they weren't able to get onto it to actually look. Once we alerted them that we believed there was Palouse Prairie there, then they were able to, as part of the permitting, send somebody out to do it. But I'm not sure how you deal with that these projects are so huge and all on private land.
We in our surveys, we ask, a lot of times it's pedestrian surveys spaced 60 meters apart across the landscape. So they do a lot of walking. They have botanists that are doing the veg surveys and making veg maps. They got the bird people doing that. They got the stream people doing this. So they got all the disciplines, and they, for almost all projects, they do a very thorough job. They really do. We've updated our shrub step and our east side step maps for habitat. So, things are getting better, but they do a good job. And we're able to get out on site too, to take a look at things.
That's great. It's nice to know that they've got botanists working on that. We always appreciate that.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Well, thanks again, everyone.